a guest speaker. He's been a friend of Busam for a while, and we're happy he's come back again to speak with you. This is Justin. He can tell you all about his company, some really great stories about what he's done and how he's gotten there. Like always, I'd encourage you to ask him questions, interrupt, say, hey, what's up with that? You know, tell us more about how you did this, that, or the other. And yeah, with that, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always impressive seeing the projects you guys are working on. I wish I had been able to do something like this in high school. I got into this much later, but this whole process is super valuable, so jealous of your experience. I started a company and run a company called Video Genie. What we do is we work with companies to do advertising. So we work with like Budweiser and Priceline.com and Disney. Anytime they want to get one of their customers on photo or video or talking about them, they use our software to do that. And so we've got this big platform that they use for different marketing things. So I can share a little bit about what my experience has been like starting a company, and then happy to answer any questions you guys have about hiring, about coming up with an idea, about getting funding. So please interrupt me as you guys have questions. So I started the company 5 years ago. At the time I was at business school here at Stanford, trying to find a good idea for a company. The idea actually came from what I did before business school. And I used to be in the Navy. I was on submarines, so I'd go under the water for like 6 months at a time. And when we'd go away, the friends and family would always give us a little box that we'd open up halfway through a deployment. And usually it was like photos or letters from families, but one year they had this DVD. And on the DVD there was just all the friends and family of the crew on video sharing these really short messages. And when I looked around at the crew, everyone was just mesmerized. They really connected with this video. And that planted this kernel in my brain that said, wow, something about video is really powerful. And then when I was at business school, we realized, you know, the goal of companies is to form this really strong emotional connection with the customer. If you guys watch like Coca-Cola TV commercials, they're really like sentimental and emotional. That's them trying to get this connection to your heart. And so I combined those two ideas. I thought video is really powerful and brands need to create a powerful connection. Maybe we can combine the two into a business idea. And so I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to do what you guys are doing. So I found some engineers in India. I did a contract where they actually built the design I had in my head. So I wrote it down on paper. We went back and forth. They built this platform, and I used that to go and get money. So I went, do you guys know about different types of investors? There's a couple different groups. The very lowest tier, like the very smallest ones, are called angel investors. This is, you know, if someone's really rich and they have money and they want to try and make more money, they can be an angel investor. And what they do is they go to guys like me and they say, hey, we like your idea and we want to give you money to try and make it bigger. So I was able to raise a round of $350,000, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money, but it is a lot of money. And that gave me enough money to hire engineers. We hired engineers, we started building more. We launched in New York with TechCrunch. They did this big promotion and we started growing. We started having more companies we were working with. And then we raised even more money. We raised $2 million from what's called a venture capitalist. Has everyone heard of venture capitalists? These are organizations that give money to entrepreneurs. They don't give money. They invest money in companies. So I raised $2 million to do what we're doing and started growing faster and hiring more people. So happy to talk about fundraising, happy to talk about building products. I will say that what I've been doing for the last 5 years has been the coolest experience of my life. Building a company and an idea and growing that and building a team and actually selling, it's really energizing. If you guys ever like do skydiving or bungee jumping or things like that, it's like that. You just feel on top of the world. But I'll also say it's definitely been the hardest thing I've ever done. And for you guys that want to go down this path for a career, you should know that the way that you learn how to do a startup is by just doing it. And anytime you do something new, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. I still make a ton of mistakes. And so I have a lot of advice and I have a lot of thoughts, but all of my advice and all of my thoughts, it just comes because I made colossal mistakes. I lost a customer, I didn't treat an employee well and they quit, I hired the wrong person and had to fire them. All of these really awful experiences, it's really the only way you can learn. And that's probably the way you guys are learning right now. You're probably breaking things, you're probably building something and you soldered the wrong cord, right? And it's hard, right? It's really painful. But the good thing is your brain is just wired to learn from those mistakes. And so every time you burn your finger or you melt a cord or you blow up an LED, your brain stores that knowledge away, so hopefully you don't make that mistake again. And that's definitely been my experience with a startup. So I'm happy to yap on, but maybe it's easier. I'd love to hear what questions you guys have or what you'd like to hear about, because I could go on for hours. Yeah?
Can you talk about hiring and the balance between someone who has the skills you need and between someone you can get along with?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. So hiring and then like that fit between, yeah. So something I'm still not really good at. I've probably hired now 20 people, 20 or 25, and our company's only 5 people. So you can imagine there's been lots of that, right? There's lots of hiring and firing and quitting and hiring. So it's something I'm still learning about. When you're hiring, it can be hard, right? Because there's what you need, and then, like you said, there's also that cultural fit. And it can be really hard to find people. So you advertise everywhere. You put it on job boards, you email everyone you know. Some people have been using a recruiter, and this is someone whose only job is to find someone to hire. So they call up hundreds of people, and they see if they can find the right fit. It's like a professional matchmaker. But one of the things I found is that when you're in a startup, it's really small, and startups are really quirky. Everyone there has got a really strong personality, and even the company's got its own flavor, its own personality. And you guys have probably worked in small groups before, or you guys have, how many people have been on a flight somewhere before, where you're on like a small plane? Well, you realize, like, if you're stuck next to someone on a flight and they're not fun to be around, it can be a really long flight, right? If they're annoying, or if they're loud, or if they have bad breath, it just really gets on your nerves very quickly because there's nowhere to go. You're stuck on the plane. A startup is like that too. You're stuck around the same people. You work really long hours. It's very intense. There's a lot of stress. And so it's really important that you work with people you like. And so I put that above everything else. We may be different. You know, I'm not an engineer. They might be an engineer. I might be one way, really extroverted. They might be really introverted. So we may be really different, but we have to get along. And we actually have everyone at our company interview anyone we're hiring. And we ask them, like, could you work with this person? And there's been some really great people, really smart, really driven, really talented, exactly what we're looking for. But there's just not that personality fit. It's not that chemistry. And for those people, we've learned we just got to let them go. And it works both ways too, because if you don't like to work with them, over time they're probably not going to want to work with us, and then they'll end up leaving. So it's really, really hard. Another thing, the best advice I got in business school, they always talk about you want to hire slowly and fire quickly. And that's something that's really hard to do, but you really have to take your time when you're hiring someone. You'll do lots of interviews, you'll do lots of reference checks. That's where you call up people they worked with and you say, hey, is this guy a jerk? And they say no or yes. You try and learn as much as possible, and you want that to be as slow as possible. But then if you realize it's not a good fit, you know, maybe it's personality, maybe they don't have the skill set, maybe they're just not the right fit, you have to make that decision really quickly to say, after a month or two, like, hey, it's just not working out, we need to part ways. And that's one of the big mistakes I've made too. I had people that stayed with the company for 6 months when I knew they weren't the right fit. It's bad for them, it's bad for us. And a startup is so small and you move so quickly, you really have to have all the right pieces or things become really complicated. What other questions? Anything? Yeah?
Have you talked about communicating with your engineers, like
Yeah.
conveying your ideas?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer, because I started out dealing with India. So when I first started, I would wake up at 5 in the morning. I'd have a call with my team in India who was just finishing the day. And I would call them up and I'd learn about everything they'd done. And then throughout the day, I would be working on refining that so that when they started work again at 9 o'clock at night here, I had everything ready to go. And one of the things I learned in that is that visuals really make a big difference. So anytime we're building something new, we do what's called like mock-ups, or you may hear them called wireframes. But it's basically, it can be as simple as a drawing on a piece of paper, all the way to, they have like really complicated software that you can use to design this. And so we always start out with these mock-ups. And then it becomes much more tangible. And we say, okay, we want this video player to be about this big. When they hit this button, they're going to see this page. And then if they say yes, they do this. If they say no, they do this. If they want to watch the video again. And you start figuring out what all the interactions are. One thing that's really important, have you guys ever heard of prototyping?
Yes.
Yeah, prototyping is you guys have probably done this, and you don't even know that that's what it's called. But prototyping is when you have an idea and you sketch it out, and it's not really real yet. You haven't built it like you've got here, but you've got that idea. That's a really important part of designing. And we'll actually take these paper prototypes, we'll go to like Walmart, and we'll stop people and we'll say, hey, if you went to a website that looked like this, and you had to create a video, what would you do? And they'll point on the paper, and we realize all sorts of things that we're doing wrong. We'll realize, oh, this button doesn't make any sense, and it needs to be at the top. Or this text no one knows what to do, so we need to make a huge button with arrows pointing to it. All sorts of things like that. And after you prototype it a lot, then we have that conversation with our engineers, and we say, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we need it to do. And our engineers are really smart, and they'll often say, look, if you're trying to do this, maybe it's faster and easier if we build it like this. And we'll think, oh, we didn't even think of that. And we'll find faster ways to build and smarter ways to build. And one of the things about a startup is that you're just constantly learning. You're constantly doing something, failing, and fixing it. And so it's really important for our engineers that we're able to build really, really quickly. And looking around, I mean, the projects you guys are working on, it seems like you guys work really quickly too. So that seems very similar to a startup. But yeah, that's a great question. What other questions? Yeah?
Why did you decide to hire engineers from overseas?
I decided to hire engineers overseas only before I raised money. And the reason I did that is it was very cheap. One of the things that's very cool right now is that we're becoming more and more of this global workforce. So you're able to hire engineers in India and China and the Ukraine and all of these different spots where there's really smart and talented people, but it doesn't cost as much to live as San Francisco. San Francisco is so expensive. If you hire an engineer here, they have a much higher salary. And so what we did is we found these teams I found these teams in India that could build what I wanted very quickly and for very little money. And so that was very helpful for me starting. Once I raised money, then I had to make a decision. Do I want to keep on hiring people remotely, where it's really cheap and quick, or do I want to hire people here in San Francisco? And I think that there's companies that do either of those, and both can be really successful. But it just kind of boils down to you and your personality. And so for me, I really, this comes from my Navy background, I really like working with people. I like being around a table and playing with things and talking and communicating. And for me, I think things go much faster that way, and it's more enjoyable. You have like this sense of camaraderie. And so I decided, look, even though it's more expensive and it can take a long time to hire someone, I want to have all my engineers in San Francisco with me. And so then I started hiring engineers here. But there's a lot of companies that say, look, we're going to have people in Denver, we'll have people in New York, we'll have people in India and the Ukraine, we'll have a global team. And there's some challenges there. Like I talked about getting up at 5 in the morning to talk on the phone. If you have this dispersed team, you might have to do that. Everyone might not be awake at the same time. So that's one downside. But the upside is the world's a big place. There's a lot of really smart people, and you might find better people if you expand that search to be global rather than just local. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
So founding a startup can sort of seem like not unsurmountable, but it's a big project. What was the first step that you took? Was it like registering the name?
It's a really good question, and the one thing I'd start off, I totally agree. It can be very overwhelming to start your own company. Before I did it, I'd spent 5 years in the Navy. I'd had no business experience at all. I'd never worked in a startup, and so like anyone can do this. If you really want to do it, anyone can start a company. But the first thing I did is this was July 10th of like 2009. I went online and I typed in incorporating a company, and I spent $200 or $300, and in Delaware, because there's all these tax advantages, I found I could register my company online. So I paid that $200 or $300, and that was probably the very first thing that I did. Well, that's not true. The very first thing I did is had a starting point of an idea and believed in it enough to go for it. Then registered the company, and then the next thing is starting to build the product. So I found those designers in India to build the website for me. The biggest mistake I see people make is they start with the company name. We used to be the One About, we're Video Genie now. In September, we're actually changing our name to Storybox. We're not alone on that. Companies change their names all the time. Actually, companies change what they do all the time, especially in those early days. And I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who they say, hey, this is my idea, I just started it, and I'm going to spend $20,000 and buy videogenie.com, or whatever the company name is. And they spend a lot of money on this website, they spend a lot of money coming up with a cool logo, and then I talked to them 3 months later, and they said, guess what? We learned that our business actually isn't going to be doing this. We found that there's a bigger business if we do this, and the company name doesn't matter, the logo doesn't matter. All this work we did and all this money we spent was completely useless. And so that's why I think, definitely don't spend a lot of money at first. Your idea is going to change a lot. And what we're doing right now, we've changed our business like 5 times. We started out doing consumer videos, so like if you had a friend with a birthday, you could use Video Genie to sing happy birthday and have your friend sing happy birthday, and we'd put together one happy birthday song with all of you. That was when we first started, and now we do nothing like that. And so if I could give one piece of advice, like don't spend a lot of money and a lot of energy at the start, because your idea is going to continue to change and continue to evolve. It's kind of like you're digging for gold. You find like a little nugget, and you're like, oh, this is cool. And then you start digging further, and you realize there's even more over here, and you start digging further, and you realize there's more over there. You have to be really open to change as you learn more. So a long answer, but did that answer your question? Cool. What else? Yeah?
Can you talk more about funding and how you get people to invest in you?
Yeah, so funding is probably every entrepreneur's least favorite part of starting a company. It's kind of like you're tap dancing for money. If you guys have ever seen the people on the streets of San Francisco, doing their song and dance with a hat, that's what fundraising feels like. It's a numbers game. So if you want to have one person invest, you have to talk to like 50 different investors, So it takes a lot of time. The first thing that people do when they want to raise money is they come up with what's called a pitch deck. It's like a PowerPoint or a keynote that in like 10 to 15 different slides talks about what the idea is, how you're going to make money, how much money you need, how are you going to use the money, who your competitors are, all of these things. And if you guys ever go down that path, if you go, there's a really famous investor called Sequoia. Have you guys heard of Sequoia before? They're really big here in Silicon Valley. If you go to their website, they've got a list of everything you need for a pitch deck. But basically you come up with this, and it describes how the company is going to work. And then you talk to people, you get introductions to investors, you go to meetings where, the little events where there might be investors. You really do everything you can to meet investors. I know people who have tweeted at investors and got a meeting that way. Sometimes, LinkedIn is a popular website and it allows you to say, oh, my friend John knows this investor, so I'm going to ask John, hey, would you mind introducing me to your investor friend? And that's how you meet them. And then when you meet with them, you usually have about 30 minutes to do your tap dance. And you say, hey, this is the best idea ever, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, this is how we're going to make money, this is how you're going to make money if you invest in us. But the hard part is, those investors, that's their job. They have people like you doing their tap dance 10 times a day. They see over 50 different song and dances a week, and every single person says that their idea is going to be the next Facebook or the next Snapchat. And they have a really hard job, because they have to sift through and say, hey, is this going to work or is it going to fail? And they know that startups are so hard that 99% of the time they fail. 99% of the time the startup just can't make it. So they have a really hard job of saying, hey, for every 100 people I met with, who's the one that I believe in the most that I'm going to give money to? And so when you're doing these song and dances, the good thing is you're starting to learn. Because these investors are really smart. They've seen thousands of ideas, and they know some things that help it work and some things that cause it to fail. And so what they start to do is say, hey, I like your idea, but I don't think people are going to pay $20 a month for this. I think they're going to pay $5 a month. And so then you have to scratch your head, and you go home and you kind of rethink your business. And you think, okay, one, is he right? He could be wrong, but maybe he or she is right or wrong. But it makes you rethink, hey, maybe my business model is wrong. Or maybe the investor, she'll say, hey, I like the business, I like the idea, and it sounds like you want pet owners to use your product. But I actually think that parents need this product for their kids. And maybe they're right. So you go home and you think about it and you think, hey, maybe if we went after parents instead of pet owners, maybe we'll make even more money or we'll make a better product. And so the good thing about this fundraising process is you're getting a lot of smart people thinking about your company and helping you out. And they could be wrong. That's the hard thing, right? Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook, he met with lots of investors. And in the early days, before they became this multi-billion-dollar company, said, this is crazy, this is stupid. Google, when they first went out, there were tons of people that turned them down. And they went and they had this incredible idea for a company we know is successful now. And people said, you know what, I think that's stupid, or I think you guys aren't the right team, or I've seen this too much. It happens all the time. Wow. Or hey, we'll give you more money. We'll give you $4 million for 20% of the company. And there's all these different rules. And that's why you have a lawyer, because they go through these long legal documents and you can't make sense of it. But then they say, you agree on what you want. And so for me, I ended up going with one investor over the other, mainly because the terms were better. And I thought it was better for me. And so I did say no to an investor. And I probably could have handled that better. But you always want to preserve really good relationships with people. And I think I kind of was really cocky at the time. And so I was like, I got my money here, or take a hike. And that wasn't the smartest thing to do. But another lesson learned. Yeah.
Why could you have not gotten funding from both places? Because
It's a good question. So sometimes people will invest alongside each other. We have like 6 different investors at this point. So sometimes when we did our $2 million round, there was 3 different people involved. One person, it's called leading the round. One person says, I'm putting in most of the money, so this is the way it's going to be. And what happens with a lot of investors is they want a certain percentage of the company. So they say, look, I'm not interested in investing and getting 2% of a company. I'm going to invest in a company and I want 20%. And if 2 people come and they want 20%, most entrepreneurs are going to say, look, I'm only giving away 20%, so I have to choose between you.
Okay, so you didn't want to give away so much of your company.
Exactly. Yep. It's kind of like, they want to be the one who owns the most. What else? These are really good questions. Anything?
Well, it could be because the afternoon group wants to start on.
Oh, I'm holding you back.
Which I wouldn't blame them for at all.
Yeah.
If you guys have any other questions, you might stick around for
Yeah,
a minute.
totally.
So you can come up and chat. But otherwise, afternoon folks, start cranking on your projects. Mornings, things. Thanks so much.
Yeah, have a good one. Good luck, guys.